Stream and small river chub fishing has never changed. There are those who might seek to convince us that it has, but usually only when there was a sale to be made. And the best time for their pursuit is winter, when food becomes scarce and conditions might make other species choose to conserve their energy reserves. Baiting a few swims with bread mash or luncheon meat cubes enables fish to be taken, potentially on the most dreadful of days. Trying to judge where that feed will settle is important, as we don't want to be feeding fish in the midst of a snag, when it is preferable to draw them out and entice them to feed in more open water. It's easy to be drawn into imagining that the mash will land on the riverbed in a congealed lump or in a million tiny pieces, but in reality it tends to break into individual flakes, ideal for bigger fish to find. Winter displays an apparently barren landscape, with trees standing like skeletal structures as evident above the water as stems, roots and debris below. In truth though, both still hold life. Freshwater mussels eject clouds of excess silt like smoke signals from the bed, and they shuffle their shells in the sand. Caddisfly larvae crawl across the river floor, clad in their various shawls of sticks, shells, weed and the like, dependent upon the species. Fish from fry to fingerlings, from adults to veteran specimens, spend the winter searching watercourses for anything that will sustain them, such as this shoal of small roach passing over in a hurry, expectantly blending into the murk as they go. Chunks of bread evident in the semi-turbid water here are under threat of a more significant forager though, as the right-hand flake disappears into the all-enveloping mouth of a hungry chub, feeding by sight and moving on, contrary to the image one might have in the mind of fish hanging over the feed awaiting a suitably attractive example. Natural features such as the tresses of remnant weed beds and flat-folded reeds can hold chub. Undercut banks offer varying degrees of seclusion, especially when the water lacks colour. Sometimes just a grassy bank or an undercut area with tree roots will provide the kind of protection that a chub would be looking for, to keep out of sight and out of the mind of predators during the day. But it is the overhanging bush or branch that is the most likely spot to be able to adorn a perfect winter morning with a fish such as this. The reward that can be expected for what is a very simple approach. Some swims can be so snaggy as to be non-starters, but a run down to an overhanging tree in open water is ideal. This pre-baited swim with a hook bait dropped just short of the branches, the line tightened, and the lack of action changed by the inducement of the hook bait moved about a foot or so, demonstrates what's possible. The line goes slack as the casting shot is moved by the fish, and a sharp strike sets a strong hook with a tightened clutch, ensuring no opportunity for the fish to bury itself in a tangle of roots. This, combined with a lack of agility, results in the chub crashing at the surface, but this is the risk of this simplistic fishing. And with the fish in the net, it will be time to move on. Not a huge fish, but anything can be welcomed on the coldest of days. A quick weigh shows this one to be just over 2 pounds. And a note will be made for future reference to see whether, over a period of seasons, the size of a population and its average weights show a trend. Slipping into place using bankside cover such as this tree's low branches keeps the fish confident. It's not always easy to thread everything through, so travelling light is essential, as is taking time to avoid swift movements. Better this than scaring the reward downstream. All we have is a rod, landing net, cushion and a roving bag for shoulder or waist that carries bait in the form of bread mash and slices for the hook, with a few shot, hooks, disgorger and scales in a pocket. The baited area is this channel between rotting reeds at the end of a depression. Fish will have been drawn up from the channel and down if close by. Bites are usually instant, first or second cast if fish are present, and if 20 minutes have passed, the angler can move on. A missed pull here, and perhaps a little quiet whispered cursing, but a fish is there. Casting is often restricted, and occasionally it will be a battle of skill to place the bait properly, but it is necessary, and perseverance will get it there. Again, a bite comes quickly, within a minute, and a better fish heads for the snags. The clutch is set tight but needs to kick in as the rod bottoms out when hitting and holding the fish in restricted areas. A series of pulls interspersed with winding, pull and wind, and slowly the fish is drawn into open water. But this is the tricky moment. Often when trying to net a fish in a situation like this, you find that the line has been wound in too much and there isn't sufficient slack to actually drag the fish over the net. Conversely, When coming to cast, it seems as if the rod is too long and it's difficult to swing a bait out. Such are the challenges of trying to extract decent fish from swims of this nature. This is the tiny River Lem in Warwickshire. A 4-pound fish, as far as we're aware, has not been caught from this river for some time. And this one is heading in that direction. It's a challenge that's been ongoing for 5 or 6 seasons. The best, about a year ago, 3.15. And this one, as you can see, suffering a little bit from a distinct bite of the tail there, probably an otter, which is a common species nearby. And on the scales, getting on towards the sort of weight we're looking for there, about £3.6, £3.7. A nice fish for the river. Back he goes. None the worse for his adventure today. Winter starts to bite, and overhead the unmistakable call of the whistling migrating widgeon, seeking out short waterside grassland on which to graze. And being ducks, it will be a scene like this that they come to see. A flooded river, in this case 2 to 3 times its normal width, as can be judged from the fence posts, apparently in the middle. But here a huge raft has formed in the barbed wire of broken off bulrushes and various other debris, after the water has started to recede from flooding. And this is a prime target for the angler looking for chub in the depths of winter. This is a swim where understanding the water is critical. Baiting a swim like this needs to be judged very carefully, and an impression made of where the bait will end up if you throw some in as loose offerings. The question then is that going to be a location where the fish will be? So it's really a case of trying to figure out where you think the fish might lie, and then conversely trying to get the bait to that point. It seems the process has been successful here though, with a decent hard fighting fish trying desperately to get underneath the raft and perhaps leave the rig wrapped round the barbed wire. But eventually, and the flow has helped the fish here, he comes to the bank. And again, looks like a reasonable fish. So that one is returned. But what we really want is this river to be falling nicely, and so we're back. Same river, same widgeon, same target. The river is lower now, probably 2 to 3 feet lower than the previous visit. And the debris lies on the fence. But this time we're approaching a deep hole, given away by the fact that the flow mid-river suddenly stops and then starts to back eddy under the near bank and up to a small raft that's formed. The remnants of the flood hang from overhanging branches, and next time the river is high, maybe that will be the spot where the chub will hang out. But back to the point in hand. A few pieces of bread crust floated on the water give a good indication as to where the food is being dragged by the flow. and it's no surprise that it ends up being pushed towards the small raft and then gathers in a still backwater of debris and of course food. And so this is the area where we expect the fish to be shoaling. Underwater in this hole, the proof can be seen. Large snails clinging to dead rushes. Potential prey for the chub with its large mouth. An appetite for anything that's edible. The end tackle for this job needs to be as simple as possible. Chub are masters at escape and will always try to get underneath the near bank into roots and rushes, debris, branches, you name it. Anything they can find, they'll spin round and unhook themselves. Or, worse, break the line. So the fewer knots, the fewer junctions, and the simpler the rig, the better. It's common therefore to use strong line, minimum of 5 pounds, probably 6 to 8 in certain circumstances, to give the angler the ability to hold them and drag them away from snags. A good strong hook is tied to the end, and it will need to be at least a size 10 and up to a size 6 or even a 4 with larger baits. There's no point using a small hook in a large bait because upon striking, the chances of it just popping out of the fish's mouth is pretty high. It's easy to be misguided by information received, particularly in written form. And it's certainly true that fishing a link ledger for chub on the basis that the line will pull through the loop is pretty pointless, because in reality when the chub bites it's just going to take everything with it, and so a swan shot or two pinched onto the line is all that's required. If we're fishing with crust, then the shot can be positioned about 3 inches from the hook, or with flake the shot would be positioned probably about 15 inches away. Even in the depths of winter though, it wouldn't be surprising for a chub to grab the bait on the drop or as soon as it hits the bottom. And so counterbalancing the weight of the shot against the size of the hook bait is quite important. Here we're trying different sizes of flake to see which sinks the most naturally. And the third option is far more realistic than either of the first two. So we'll cast out and leave this river to consider reading streams in more detail. From experience, having fished this swim a few times, I know that there are extra features about it that make it different to other swims and therefore one to target. For instance, straight down here there's an 8-foot hole, so this bank could be undercut and I could slide in at any moment, but that's the spot where a big chub might sit, or two. And similarly, the raft opposite me wasn't there last time I came, so that's another feature that's added, where fish could hole up and the odd bigger fish might just be sat there waiting. So what I've found by fishing this piece of river is that every swim, even though you think you know what might be going on under the water, the more you investigate, the more you find and the more opportunities arise. I think two simple rules apply when it comes to fishing small streams. It's either going to be clear or it's going to be murky like it is today because there's been some rain. And to keep it really simple, if it's murky, it's going to be flowing faster. So then I tend to look for areas where there's slack water and fish on the edge of that, where the fast water meets it. And if it's clear water and it's low, then generally speaking, I'm looking for some flow, just to try and imagine the fish being in that oxygenated water. But one thing that is quite important to bear in mind is that a swim like this, which I've fished 2 or 3 times and thankfully not had a bite in, is how you would actually get a fish out if you hooked one, because it's, as you can see, very snaggy, and the chance of being able to net a fish here are pretty slim now, that as all this debris has gathered over the last few months. Sitting back in the gentle warmth of a weak winter sun, there can surely be no better angling pleasure than the solitude this provides. Below the water lies the mystery, the conundrum. Is there even anything there? After 20 minutes or so of inactivity, a couple more balls of bread mash are introduced. And surprisingly, the individual pieces descend quite quickly to the bottom. This is in the hope of enticing fish that might be hanging around in the area to actually feed. A liftable snag can produce useful information, as here, where numerous snails, shrimps and the like have sought and created a haven for the winter. So was there anything there? Well, yes, in the form of a group of feeding chub, and nice ones too. Anything over 2.5 pounds is worth catching in such circumstances in small lowland rivers and streams, and these appear to exceed that weight comfortably. The further mash feed is devoured, and a bit of a frenzy ensues as the individuals of the shoal compete for the flakes and crusts. Some of these fish could be approaching 4 pounds, a big fish for a small stream. It can be useful to alternate crust with a shot 3 inches away from the hook and flake with a shot 18 inches away from the hook, as the change can often produce a bite in otherwise apparently inactive situations. Fish might brush against the line or eject a briefly mouthed bait, causing some movement of the tip. But the ensuing bite is unmistakable, and this is clearly a good fish. hooked as the tip started to wrap round. The clutch rapidly reached for as the adversary dives for near-side snags in the hope of escape. Fish gets into the flow and then under the near-side raft. Not this time though, as it is eventually tamed and netted. This chunky, well-fed individual is carefully unhooked. Not a 4-pounder, but over 3, and probably over 3.5. And it's this that makes it all worthwhile. The challenge of winter chub, when nothing else will feed.